Hey guys, tonight we're sitting on a porch at dusk, watching the sky fade from blue to violet, with nothing to check, nothing to scroll, just the sound of cicadas and the feeling that time could take its time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're re-watching from and what time it is. I love seeing where these stories find you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. There's something your brain remembers about watching the sky change colors, something deeper than a photograph, more lasting than a sunset picture on your phone. It's the memory of sitting still, of doing nothing at all, and feeling like that was enough, like you are enough. Just you, the porch steps beneath you, and the sky putting on a show it never advertised, never rushed, never asked you to share with anyone. You were maybe 7, maybe 10, maybe somewhere in that golden stretch of childhood when summer evenings lasted forever. Your parents were inside, doing whatever parents did in that mysterious adult world of dinner preparations and bill payments. And you? You were outside, perched on the top step of the porch, legs dangling, watching the sky do what it does best, change so slowly you could barely notice. And yet somehow, when you blinked, everything had shifted. The blue of afternoon, that bright, almost aggressive blue that made you squint, was softening now, like someone had dipped it in milk. It wasn't quite lavender yet, not quite pink, just gentler. The edges of clouds that had been white and sharp were now catching something golden, something amber, like they'd been dipped in honey. And you sat there, doing absolutely nothing, and it felt like the most important thing you'd done all day. Some psychologists argue that children process time differently than adults, that their perception of duration is tied to the ratio of their age to the length of time being measured. A summer for a 7-year-old feels longer than a summer for a 37-year-old because it represents a larger fraction of their lived experience. But there's more to it than math. There's something about childhood perception that makes waiting feel less like waiting and more like existing, like the space between moments wasn't empty. It was full of sky. Your brain was recording everything, even though you didn't know it. The exact temperature of the wood beneath you, warm from the day's sun, but cooling now, just slightly. The smell in the air, cut grass from 3 houses down, mixed with something floral you couldn't name, mixed with the faint metallic scent that meant rain might come later, or might not. The sound of a neighbor's wind chime, lazy and sporadic, like it was too tired to make a proper melody. And the colors. Oh, the colors. Scientists have discovered that our brains don't just store visual memories as static images. They store them as emotional experiences, tagged with context and feeling. The hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain, works with the amygdala to encode memories that matter. And somehow, even at 7 or 10 or 12, your brain knew this mattered. This sky, this moment, this feeling of being small in the best way possible. Not insignificant, but held, cradled by something larger than yourself. The blue was definitely lavender now, streaked with coral. You remember that coral specifically, not quite pink, not quite orange, but something softer than both, like the inside of a seashell. It spread across the horizon in stripes, horizontal and lazy, like someone painting with a brush too wide and too relaxed to make straight lines. You didn't think about tomorrow's spelling test. You didn't worry about whether your best friend was mad at you. You didn't wonder if you were good enough, smart enough, likable enough. Those thoughts existed somewhere, sure, but they felt distant, muted, like voices from another room with the door mostly closed. Right now, there was just this, the cooling wood, the changing sky, the cicadas beginning their evening song. Here is a curious thing about boredom in childhood. It wasn't the enemy we've made it today. Researchers studying the history of leisure have found that the concept of boredom as something to be immediately fixed is relatively modern. tied closely to the rise of constant entertainment and stimulation. Before screens, before the expectation of perpetual engagement, boredom was just part of the day. And in that boredom, in that space of nothing happening, your brain did some of its most important work. It wondered. It invented. It noticed. It noticed, for instance, the way the clouds weren't just moving. They were dissolving, reshaping, like someone was sculpting them in real time with invisible hands. That one looked like a dragon for a moment, then a mountain, then nothing in particular. You didn't need it to be anything. You just watched it be. The street was quiet, except for the occasional car passing by. Headlights not quite necessary yet, but turned on anyway, glowing yellow in the purpling light. You could hear someone's TV through an open window, the muffled sound of a laugh track, and it felt comforting rather than intrusive. Life was happening all around you, gentle and slow, and you were part of it without having to do anything. Your mind, in this moment, was doing something extraordinary. It was synchronizing. Some neuroscientists describe this as a state of open awareness, when your attention isn't fixed on any single thing, but rather diffused across your environment. It's the opposite of focus, but it's not distraction. It's absorption. Your brain waves were likely settling into alpha rhythms, associated with relaxed wakefulness, with daydreaming, with that soft mental state between alert and asleep. And in this state, your brain wasn't passive. It was consolidating. It was processing. It was taking all the scattered pieces of your day, the argument at recess, the gold star on your homework, the way your mom hummed while folding laundry, and filing them away, making sense of them, weaving them into the larger story of who you were becoming. But you didn't know any of that. You just knew the sky was beautiful, and you were watching it, and somehow that was enough. The violet was deeper now, royal and rich, pooling at the top of the sky like spilled ink. The coral had faded to rose, then to salmon, then to something peachy and faint. The first star appeared, not the actual first star, probably, but the first one you noticed, and you did that thing you always did. You whispered the rhyme under your breath. Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. You made your wish. You don't remember what you wished for. Maybe it was something big, like a puppy or world peace. Maybe it was something small, like extra dessert or a good grade on Friday's test. Maybe you wished for nothing to change, for this moment to last, for summer evenings to always feel this long, this soft, this safe. Your brain remembers that wish, even if you don't. It's in there somewhere, tucked into the same neural pathways that stored the smell of cut grass and the feel of cooling wood, and the exact shade of coral lavender rose that painted the sky that evening. And here's the thing about memories like this. They're not just records of the past. They're templates. They become the baseline your brain uses to measure calm, safety, peace. For the rest of your life, when you need to remember what contentment feels like, your brain will pull up files like this one. The sky changing colors, the porch beneath you, the feeling that time could stretch, that you could sit still, that nothing needed to happen for life to be good. Some researchers call these anchor memories, foundational experiences that shape our emotional landscape. They're not always dramatic or significant in an obvious way. They're often quiet, simple, almost boring to describe, but they matter. They matter so much. The mosquitoes were starting to come out now, and you could hear your mom calling from inside, telling you it was almost time to come in, to wash up for dinner, but not yet. Not quite yet. You had a few more minutes, and you were going to use them all. The sky was dimming now, the colors fading not into darkness, but into a kind of deep blue gray, like the world was gently closing its eyes. The first fireflies blinked in the bushes at the edge of the yard, tiny moving stars, here and gone and here again. You watched them with the same patient attention you'd given the sky, marveling at their impossible glow. Your breathing had slowed without you noticing. Your shoulders had dropped. Your jaw had unclenched. Your whole body had settled into the rhythm of the evening, into the pace of the sky's transformation, into the knowledge that nothing needed to be rushed. And tomorrow, you'd wake up and do it all again. Play until you were tired, eat until you were full, run until you were breathless. And then, as the day wound down, you'd find yourself back here, on this porch, watching the sky, feeling this feeling. Your brain didn't know it was filing this away as treasure. It just knew it felt good. Safe, right. And decades later, when life got complicated and loud and fast, when screens glowed at you from every direction, and time felt like it was always running out, some quiet part of your brain would remember. There was once a porch, and a sky, and a version of you who knew how to sit still. Who knew that watching the world change colors was enough? Who knew that time, when you let it, could take its time? And you breathe just a little softer now. The thing about sitting on that porch, watching the sky turn from day to evening, is that you weren't just watching. You were learning. Your brain, still soft and moldable in all the ways that childhood brains are, was taking notes. It was building neural pathways, establishing patterns, creating a blueprint for what calm could feel like. Let's talk about what was happening inside your head during those long, quiet moments, because it wasn't nothing. It was never nothing. Your visual cortex, located at the back of your brain in the occipital lobe, was working overtime. Every shift in color, every gradation from blue to lavender to coral, was being processed by millions of neurons firing in careful coordination. But here's the interesting part. Your brain wasn't just recording colors as data points. It was wrapping them in emotion, in context, in the whole sensory experience of being you, on that porch, in that moment. Some psychologists argue that aesthetic experiences, like watching a beautiful sunset, activate the brain as reward centers in ways similar to more obvious pleasures like eating chocolate or listening to music you love. The ventral striatum lights up. Dopamine gets released. Your brain is essentially telling you, this is good. Pay attention to this. Remember this. But unlike the quick hit of pleasure from a sweet treat, the reward from watching the sky was slow, sustained, almost meditative. It taught your brain that good things don't always come fast, that beauty can unfold gradually, that patience has its own kind of sweetness. You shifted on the step, adjusting your position. Maybe you hugged your knees to your chest, resting your chin on top. Maybe you leaned back on your elbows, stretching your legs out. Your body was finding its comfortable shape, the way bodies do when they're allowed to settle, when there's nowhere else they need to be. And in that settling, something else was happening. Your nervous system was down-regulating. That's the technical term for it, down-regulating, but what it felt like was simply softening. Your heart rate was slowing. Your breath was deepening. The sympathetic nervous system, responsible for your fight or flight response, was taking a back seat. The parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode, was gently taking the wheel. This is the state your body was designed to spend most of its time in. Not stressed, not alert, not ready for danger. Just existing, resting, being. Modern research on the effects of nature exposure has shown that even brief periods of viewing natural scenes can lower cortisol levels, reduce blood pressure, and improve mood. And you were doing this without trying, without knowing it counted as therapy, or self-care, or any of the terms we've invented to describe what used to be just living. The sky had deepened into that particular shade of blue-violet that only exists for about 15 minutes each evening. It's called the blue hour by photographers, though it's not really an hour at all. It's that liminal space between day and night when the sun has set, but darkness hasn't quite arrived, when the world is painted in shades of twilight that feel almost magical. Your eyes were adjusting to the dimming light, pupils dilating to let in more of the fading day. This biological response, so automatic you never thought about it, was part of a system that had evolved over Millions of years designed to help your ancestors navigate the transition from day to night, to stay safe in the vulnerable hours of dusk. But you weren't worried about predators or danger. You were just watching, just being, just letting the colors wash over you like a slow, silent symphony. Here is something curious. Researchers studying childhood development have found that unstructured outdoor time where children aren't directed to do anything specific, where they are free to simply observe and explore, is crucial for developing what is called executive function. That's your brain's ability to plan, focus, remember instructions, and manage multiple tasks. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? That doing nothing helps you learn to do everything? But it makes sense when you think about it. Your brain needs time to process, to integrate, to make sense of all the input it receives during busy, structured, goal-oriented activities. And those quiet moments on the porch? That was processing time. That was your brain's chance to sort through the day's experiences, to file them away, to build the cognitive infrastructure you'd rely on for the rest of your life. A moth fluttered past, drawn to the porch light your mom had just turned on inside. You watched it circle, erratic and purposeful all at once, and you wondered where it was going, what it wanted, whether it could see the sky changing colors the way you could. These were the kinds of questions that filled your mind in these moments. Not anxious questions, not productive questions, just curious ones, wondering for the sake of wondering. The air had cooled enough now that you could feel it on your skin, that subtle shift from warm to pleasant to almost cool. You weren't cold yet, but you could imagine being cold, could sense that in another hour or so you'd want to go inside, to pull on a sweatshirt, to curl up under a blanket. But not yet, not quite yet. Some neuroscientists study what they call prospective cognition, your brain's ability to imagine future scenarios. And even in these simple sensory observations, your brain was practicing this skill, feeling the cooling air and projecting forward. Soon it will be cold. Watching the darkening sky and predicting, soon it will be night. This wasn't worry. It was just awareness, just your brain running its simulations, building its models of how the world works. You heard laughter from a few houses down, kids playing one last game before being called in for the night. Their voices carried in the still air, punctuated by the metallic clang of a basketball hitting pavement. Someone's dad calling out encouragement or instruction. The sounds were part of the evening's texture, woven into the experience of watching the sky the way background music is woven into a film. Your attention drifted, then returned, then drifted again. This is what attention was supposed to do, before we trained it to be rigid, before we demanded it focus, focus, focus. Attention, in its natural state, is fluid. It flows. It ebbs and surges like water, moving toward whatever catches its interest, then moving away when that interest fades. The clouds had dissolved into the darker sky now, becoming indistinguishable from the general dimness. The coral and salmon and peach had given way to deeper hues, plum and navy and charcoal. The stars were more visible now, not just one or two but dozens, pinpricks of light scattered across the darkening canvas. You tried to find constellations, the way the library book had shown you. The Big Dipper was easy. Everyone could find the Big Dipper. 7 stars in a shape that actually looked like what it was supposed to be. Unlike most constellations, which required significant imagination and possibly ancient Greek context to make sense of. Some psychologists argue that pattern recognition, the ability to find meaningful shapes in random arrangements, is one of the foundational cognitive skills that makes us human. It's how we learn to read, to do math, to understand music and language and all the complex systems that structure our world. And here you were, practicing it without knowing, looking up at random stars and finding dippers and bears and hunters and myths. Your mind created stories about the stars without trying, the way minds do when they're relaxed and free. Maybe you imagined the stars as holes in a dark blanket, letting light through from some brighter place beyond. Maybe you thought of them as distant suns, with their own planets and their own porches, and their own children sitting and watching their own skies change color. The philosopher's mind and the child's mind aren't as different as we think. Both ask big questions without needing immediate answers. Both wonder freely, without pressure to be productive or correct. Both can sit with mystery and find it comfortable rather than threatening. A car turned onto your street, headlights sweeping across the yard, momentarily illuminating the grass, the bushes, the edge of the porch where you sat. Then it passed, and the gentle darkness returned, and you remained. Your mom called again from inside, more insistent this time, but not angry. Just time. It was time. And you knew she was right, could feel it in the way the air had shifted, the way your stomach had started to think about dinner, the way the day was clearly done, and the night was clearly beginning. But you took one more minute. Just one. To memorize this, to breathe it in, to let your brain take its final notes on this particular evening's performance. The sky was deep blue-black now, punctuated by stars. The horizon still held a faint glow, like a night light left on, like the day's last signature before signing off completely. And you stood up, slowly, feeling the stiffness in your legs from sitting, feeling the cool wood under your feet as you walked across the porch toward the screen door that was letting warm yellow light spill out into the night. You looked back once more, just once, just to check. The sky was still there. Still changing, actually, even now, still moving from blue-black to pure black, still revealing new stars as your eyes adjusted. It would keep changing all night, arcing through darkness, and then, though you'd be asleep to witness it, it would begin the whole process in reverse, lightening toward dawn, painting itself in golds and pinks, and eventually that bright aggressive blue that started this whole cycle over again. But for now, you went inside. The screen door creaked and snapped shut behind you. The smell of dinner, something tomato-based, maybe spaghetti, wrapped around you like a hug. Your mom smiled at you from the kitchen, asked if you'd washed your hands, didn't wait for an answer because she already knew you hadn't. And tomorrow, you'd do it again. The porch, the sky, the watching, the remembering to remember. Your brain filed this away with all the others, building a collection of evenings, a library of skies, a catalog of moments when you sat still and let the world be, beautiful without needing to capture it, share it, or prove you'd been there. You just knew, and that was enough, and you breathe. A little deeper now, let's talk about color for a moment. Not the physics of it, not the wavelengths and light spectrum charts, but the way color lived in your childhood, vivid, emotional, almost edible in its intensity. The lavender of that evening sky wasn't just a color. It was a feeling. It was the taste of grape popsicles and the smell of your grandmother's sachets and the softness of your favorite warm t-shirt all mixed together. Your brain didn't store colors in neat, separate files. It tangled them up with everything else you were experiencing, creating what researchers call synesthetic memories. Memories where one sense triggers another, where seeing a color can evoke a taste, a sound, a texture. You were back on the porch now, in your memory, the way you'd be back there 1,000 more times throughout your life. The evening had that particular quality of summer, stretched and warm and seemingly infinite. School was a distant concept, something that existed in another season, another lifetime. Right now, there was only this, the wood grain under your fingers as you traced it absently, the faint stick of humidity on your skin, the sky performing its nightly transformation. The blue hour had arrived again, or maybe this was a different evening, a different blue hour, but they all blended together in memory like watercolors running into each other on paper. That's the thing about repeated experiences. They become one experience, a composite, a greatest hits album of all the times you sat here and watched this happen. Some psychologists argue that routine childhood experiences create what is called semantic memory. general knowledge about the world, as opposed to episodic memory, which stores specific events. But for you, it was both. You knew, generally, what evening looked like, how the sky transformed, what it felt like to sit and watch. But you also remembered specific evenings. The one when the cat came and sat beside you, the one when it started to rain, and you stayed out anyway until you were soaked. The one when your dad came out and sat next to you and didn't say anything at all, just watched with you. The coral pink that streaked across the horizon wasn't the same coral pink as the crayon in your art box, even though they shared a name. This coral pink was alive, moving, temporary. It existed for maybe 20 minutes and then transformed into something else, deeper, rose-tinted, fading at the edges like a bruise in reverse, healing from dark to light instead of light to dark. You developed preferences during these viewings. You had favorite color combinations. The evening when the purple was so deep, it looked almost black at the top, fading down through violet and lavender to a strip of brilliant orange at the horizon. That one was a masterpiece. You tried to draw it later with your markers and colored pencils, but it never looked right on paper. The colors were too flat, too separate. They didn't blend and shift the way they did in the sky. This is something artists have struggled with forever. How to capture the way colors interact in nature, the way light transforms them, the way they seem to glow from within. The Impressionists tried, with their broken brushstrokes and emphasis on light. The Romantics tried, with their dramatic skies and emphasis on emotion. But even they couldn't quite capture what your eyes saw from that porch, the way the colors weren't just colors, but moods, atmospheres, entire feelings painted across the visible world. Here is a curious thing about color perception. Researchers studying vision have found that children actually see colors slightly differently than adults. Their lenses are clearer, letting in more UV light, making blues and purples appear more vibrant. As we age, our lenses gradually yellow, warming our perception of the world. So the colors you saw then, on that porch, in that childhood, they were objectively more vivid than the colors you see now. You weren't imagining their intensity. You were seeing more clearly than you ever would again. The grass in the yard was losing its green to the dimness, becoming a kind of blue-gray in the fading light. This is how the world retreats at dusk, not all at once, but gradually, colors draining away like water from a bath, leaving behind shapes and shadows. The tree that had been bright and detailed in the afternoon sun was now just a silhouette, a flat, dark cutout against the layered colors of the sky. You watched it transform, this familiar tree. By day, you knew every branch, could climb most of them, had named some of them, the reading branch, the bird's nest branch, the one that hung over the fence into the neighbor's yard. But at dusk, it became mysterious, unknowable, almost threatening in its darkness. And yet you weren't afraid, because it was still your tree, still safe, still part of this safe world of porches and evening skies and parents inside making dinner. Some neuroscientists study what they call object permanence, the understanding that things continue to exist even when we can't see them clearly. Babies develop this around 8 months old, the ability to know that mom still exists even when she's left the room. But there's an emotional version of object permanence too, an understanding that things remain themselves even when circumstances change them. The tree was still the tree, even in darkness. The sky was still the sky, even as its colors shifted and faded. A bat swooped past, quick and erratic, and you followed its flight path for a moment before losing it against the darkening sky. Bats had seemed scary once, in that vague way that unfamiliar things are scary to small children. But at some point, you'd learned they were just eating mosquitoes, just doing their job in the ecosystem, and they'd become another part of the evening's choreography. The learning that happens in childhood isn't always formal or structured. Sometimes it's just this: observation, repeated exposure, gradual familiarization. You learned the rhythms of evening without a textbook. You learned the sequence of the sky's colors without a chart. You learned what safe felt like without anyone explicitly teaching you. You just absorbed it, the way children absorb everything, effortlessly and completely. The stars were emerging more boldly now, claiming their space in the darkening canvas. You'd learned some of their names from that library book, Sirius, Arcturus, Vega, and you tried to remember which was which. But mostly you just appreciated them as lights, as company, as proof that the darkness wasn't empty, but full, crowded with distant suns and possibilities. Some psychologists argue that childhood wonder, that sense of awe at the world's vastness and beauty, is one of the most important psychological experiences we can have. It creates what researchers call small self, a diminishment of the ego, a recognition of being part of something larger. And far from being frightening, this smallness feels good, comforting, right. You felt it then, sitting on that porch, looking up at those emerging stars. You were tiny. Your porch was tiny. Your house, your street, your town, all tiny, insignificant, barely a pixel in the massive image of the universe. And somehow that felt okay. Better than okay. It felt like relief. Like you didn't have to be big or important or special. You could just be small and watching and part of this vast, turning world. The temperature had dropped enough now that you could see your breath if you wanted to. Little clouds of vapor that appeared and dissipated. You entertained yourself for a moment, making dragon breaths, pretending to be a creature from one of your books, but it didn't hold your interest. The real show was above you, ongoing, requiring nothing from you except attention. And that's what you gave it. Pure, undivided, uncomplicated attention. The kind of attention that didn't check the time, didn't wonder what else you could be doing, didn't judge itself for being unproductive. You just watched. And your brain just filed it away. And the evening just kept transforming, patient and unhurried, following rhythms that had existed long before you were born and would continue long after you were gone. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves in your tree, carrying the smell of someone's dryer vent, warm, clean, sharp with the scent of detergent. Laundry smell had become evening smell in your neighborhood, mixed with lawnmower gas and chlorine from the pools, and whatever was on various families' dinner tables. These smells didn't distract from the sky. They enhanced it, created a full sensory experience that your brain bundled together. Evening. This is what evening is. This combination of cooling air and changing colors and neighborhood sounds and familiar smells. This is the package. This is the memory. Your mom appeared at the screen door, backlit by the kitchen light, and told you, gently but firmly, that it was really time now. And you went because you were a good kid who listened, mostly, but also because you were genuinely hungry, and the spell of the evening had been long enough, had filled you up with whatever it was you came out here to get. You stood, brushed off the back of your shorts, more from habit than necessity. The porch was clean, and walked toward the yellow light of home. But you carried the colors with you, the lavender and coral and deep blue and all the shades between. They were filed away now, permanent residents in your brain's vast library, ready to be pulled out years later when you needed to remember what peace looked like, what beauty felt like, what it meant to sit still and let the world paint itself new. And you breathe soft as twilight now. Session 4. The wisdom of waiting. There was a word you didn't know yet, sitting on that porch, watching the sky. Patience. You knew the concept, waiting your turn, not interrupting, letting the cookies cool before eating them. But you didn't know that what you were practicing, evening after evening, was one of the most valuable skills you'd ever develop. The sky couldn't be rushed. This was perhaps the first truly important lesson it taught you, though you didn't recognize it as a lesson at the time. You couldn't make the sunset happen faster. You couldn't skip to the good part, though it was all good parts, really. You just had to be there, present, while it unfolded at its own pace. In our modern world, we've lost this understanding. We want instant sunsets, filtered and enhanced and delivered immediately to our screens. We want the beauty without the waiting, the payoff without the process. But you on that porch, in that time before such expectations existed, you knew better. Or rather, you didn't know any different, which was its own kind of knowing. Some psychologists argue that the ability to delay gratification, to wait for better outcomes rather than taking immediate rewards, is one of the strongest predictors of success and well-being later in life. They've done studies, famous ones, with children and marshmallows, testing whether kids can wait 15 minutes for 2 marshmallows instead of eating one immediately. And while those studies measure something important, they miss something too. Waiting doesn't have to be torture. Sometimes waiting is the experience, not just the obstacle to the experience. You weren't suffering, sitting there. You weren't gritting your teeth, counting down minutes until some better moment arrived. This was the moment. The waiting was the thing. The slow transformation of the sky from blue to lavender to coral to violet to navy. That progression was the entire point, not a delay before some finale. The cicadas had reached their full evening volume now, a wall of sound that somehow didn't feel loud. It was just there, the same way the air was there, the same way the porch was there. Your ears had stopped registering it as noise and started experiencing it as texture, as atmosphere, as the audio equivalent of the sky's colors. You'd started to notice the rhythm in their song, how it would swell and fade, like breathing, like waves. Some summers had more cicadas than others. You'd eventually learn these were the years they emerged en masse, following mysterious 13 or 17-year cycles. And on those summers, the sound was almost overwhelming, vibrating through the air so intensely you could feel it in your chest. But even in quieter years, they were there, marking time, measuring evening, providing a soundtrack to the sky's slow show. Here is something curious about natural rhythms. Researchers studying circadian biology have found that humans are deeply affected by repetitive natural sounds. Our brains entrain to them, synchronize with them in ways that promote relaxation and mental clarity. The rhythmic sound of ocean waves, of rainfall, of wind through trees, of cicadas singing. These aren't just pleasant background noise. They're actually regulating your nervous system, helping your body remember its own natural rhythms. You felt this without understanding it. Your breathing had slowed to match some internal metronome that the evening had set. Your thoughts had spaced themselves out, becoming less frequent, less urgent. The typical chatter of your mind, worries about tomorrow, replays of today, plans and fears and hopes, had quieted to something more like watching, observing, being. A firefly drifted past, blinking its mysterious Morse code message to potential mates. You watched it describe a lazy arc across the yard, here gone, a living demonstration of impermanence and return. Everything about summer evenings was like this. You were learning, appearing and disappearing, brightening and fading, nothing staying the same, but also nothing truly leaving. The sky had shifted again while you weren't paying close attention. The coral had deepened to rose gold, and the violet had spread across more of the visible dome, pushing the remaining blue toward the horizon. Soon there would be no blue at all, just the deeper shades of dusk, but that transition was still minutes away. Many minutes. Maybe 15, maybe 20. You couldn't tell and didn't need to. Some neuroscientists study what they call time perception, how we experience the passage of moments, how this changes with age and attention and emotional state. Time moves differently when you're absorbed in something, when you're bored, when you're afraid, when you're happy. And for children, especially children before the age of urgent schedules and packed activities, time has a different quality altogether. It's elastic, generous, abundant. You had nowhere else to be. This is almost impossible to imagine now. in our world of constant obligations and scheduling. But then, on that porch, you had literally nowhere else you needed to be. No appointment to get to, no notification to check, no task waiting for completion. You were exactly where you were supposed to be, doing exactly what you were supposed to be doing, which was nothing at all except existing and observing. Your dad came out for a moment, walked to the end of the porch, looked up at the sky. "Pretty tonight," he said, more to himself than to you. You nodded, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you just made a small sound of agreement. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds, hands in his pockets, then went back inside. The screen door squeaked and snapped. That brief interaction, so minimal it barely counted as an interaction, somehow made everything better. Confirmed that you weren't weird for sitting out here.